Whenever I, transition out of a pandemic, I like to come out here to Southern California and drive something like this 2021 Mazda MX-5 Miata on a nice day on the roads above the Pacific Ocean and the Santa Monica Mountains. That's where I'm heading at 5:45 in the morning to beat the traffic. I thought it would be a good place to reconnect with a car model I haven't driven in 6 years. It hasn't changed a whole lot since then, but it is different in some important ways. This is the best camera shot I could get of the ride up because, like a dummy, I brought a magnetic camera mount and forgot that a lot of the MX-5's body panels, including the trunk lid, are aluminum. I know that was stupid of me, but it's one of the ways the MX-5 keeps its weight down. Probably worth mentioning. When this generation came out, that's the ND generation Miata, it was lighter than the previous one. That was a happy surprise. It meant that Mazda wasn't going to do what a lot of other car companies do, make their sports cars heavier, larger, with more and more features, and more expensive over time, eventually overwhelming its original spec until it loses its identity completely and becomes a fat GT car that costs six figures. It's nice that Mazda understands that every car doesn't have to be everything to everyone, that sports cars can be different and purpose-built for a reason, and that there are bumpers around that reason that shouldn't be moved. The ride up the Pacific Coast always reminds me of a TV show I used to watch when I was a kid. It was called The Rockford Files. It starred the actor James Garner as an ex-con private eye who drove a Firebird and lived in a shitty mobile home in a parking lot next to the beach in Malibu. Jim Rockford was his name, and he was what you'd call an anti-hero, meaning he wasn't perfect. He was kind of a screw-up, and I think he got punched in the face at least once an episode. But every once in a while, things went the right way up for Jim Rockford. He solved a mystery, he fell in love, he got a check. Better yet, he got cash, and that kept him going. Gas for the Firebird, pay the phone bill, back the bill collectors up. Anyway, when I was a kid, I wanted to live in a mobile home on the beach in Malibu just like Jim Rockford. I never did. That's not really relevant, it's just a story to put behind this footage. Although now that you mention it, Rockford used to get chased by the bad guys a lot, and a lot of times he'd lose them by doing a reverse to forward J-turn in his Firebird. To this day, that's called pulling a Rockford. Anyway, the last Miata I drove was from the latest generation, but in 2019 it got an updated engine. 181 horsepower and 154 pounds-feet. It's higher revving and also produces more mid-range torque. It's perfect for this car. Mazda's always been clear about matching the MX-5's power to its chassis, and with this car's higher limits, it needed a more potent engine. People are still going to say it's too slow, but I think that just means you're on the wrong road. In fact, the MX-5 is at home on a tight canyon road like this. The original Miata was developed on roads similar to this up the coast in Santa Barbara back in 1985. The prototype was so heavily disguised, no one had any idea what it could be. Who would have guessed it was a rear-drive roadster that would stay in production for more than 30 years? Not this kid, not anyone. What people say about the MX-5 suspension, yes, is true. It leans and pitches and squats, and you can feel that happening. And you have to drive to those modulations. That's the stock Miata tune. It always has been. Chris Harris once said about a previous MX-5 that it drove with the precision of a boneless limb. I always thought that was a funny line. But that's a matter of opinion and driving style. In fact, this one feels to me like it rolls in a more controlled way than it did before. You've always had to accept that driving a stock Miata was a bit like doing a skateboard slalom, and to enjoy that feeling of it conforming. If you don't, well, there's always been plenty of aftermarket gear you can buy and do your own tune. That's what makes the Miata so popular. It's such a good car to cut your teeth on for both racing and tuning. Heading up here makes me think about California stories. I like those stories, the true ones and the made-up ones. There's a nonfiction writer named Richard Rayner who wrote a book about LA in the 1920s. It's about aspiration, optimism, viciousness, yearning, celebrities, the religious upsurge, the feeling that everything on earth, good and evil, were happening here all at once. It's called A Bright and Guilty Place. I think that's a great name for a book about LA. You should check it out. I'm almost out of footage, but I think the best thing about driving up here on these roads, aside from the perfect camber and pavement as it snakes upward, is the view you get from the top. In fact, the MX-5 is the perfect car for driving up here. It's compliant, it's comfortable, and it's exactly the kind of car I'd like to break my California fast with. What a year it's been.